Welcome to the Retirement Learning Lab, where we help you to navigate the journey to a secure and fulfilling retirement. I'm your host, Van Richards, and today we're continuing our series on getting your financial house in order. If you've been following along, you've organized your financial documents and created a comprehensive financial inventory. If you haven't gotten to that, go and listen to some of the previous podcasts, and that'll bring you up to date. But today, we're taking that crucial next step, that is understanding what those numbers actually mean for your future retirement. You see, having a list of your assets and your liabilities, well, that's one thing. But understanding how they work together to build your retirement security, that's a completely different issue, and it's very important. That's where the real power lies. Today, we're going to transform those numbers from simple list into a strategic roadmap for your retirement planning. But before we dive in, I want to mention that everything that we discuss today is purely educational. I'm going to share some insights about retirement planning and financial strategies, but nothing that you hear today should constitute investment or legal or financial advice. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of today's podcast for more information on the limitations of this information. Well, with that said, let's talk about understanding your true financial position. Let me start by explaining why understanding your net worth will change everything about how you approach retirement planning. You see, there's a big difference between knowing what you own and understanding what it means for your future. It's like the difference between having a pile of building materials in your yard versus having an architect's blueprint that shows you exactly how the house is to be constructed. In my 30 plus years of helping people plan for retirement, I've seen this aha moment happen countless times. People come to me with their financial inventory completed. They know that they have, for example, $500,000 in their 401k, maybe $150,000 in savings, and their home might be paid off with, let's say it's worth $400,000. But with all of those assets, they still ask me, Van, is this going to be enough? Can I actually retire? What does this actually mean? They're asking me what all of that financial stuff that they have brought to me is going to give to them toward their future. You see, just recently, I had a conversation with a couple who had been diligently saving for decades. The husband, he was a teacher. He said to me, Van, we've got our numbers all written down just like you showed us how to do, but we still don't know if we're rich or poor or somewhere in between. Are we going to be okay? That's the exact question we're going to answer today. Let me share with you two stories that perfectly illustrate why understanding your financial position is so crucial, and why identical numbers can mean completely different things for different people. The first story is about a couple, I'll call them Mike and Janet. They came to me with what seemed like a solid financial position. They had $750,000 in their combined retirement accounts. Their home was worth about $450,000 with no mortgage, and about $50,000 in savings. That brought their net worth to about $1.25 million. When Mike told me these numbers, he was confident. He said, Van, we are millionaires, and I am so proud of what my wife and I have been able to accomplish. We should be all set for retirement, right? But we dug a lot deeper. We discovered some concerning realities too. Mike and Janet were used to spending about $85,000 a year in retirement. That's what they wanted to do. They had expensive hobbies. Mike loved to golf at nice golf courses, and Janet was passionate about traveling a lot of different places with Mike and also with friends. Plus, they were committed to helping their daughter with their children's college expenses. Here's what we found, and this is a stark reality. Even with $1.25 million net worth, they could only sustain about $50,000 a year in retirement income without digging into the principal. You see, that's real important. When you start digging into that principal, that's actually what's producing the money that they're going to live off of for the rest of their lives, no matter how long that might be. And they're hoping it's going to be a long and fruitful and enjoyable retirement. But that's barely 60% of what they needed to maintain their lifestyle. Mike was shocked. He said, but Van, we're millionaires. How can we not have enough money? That's when we had one of the most important conversations in retirement planning. The conversation about the needs, the wants, and the desires. You see, being a millionaire doesn't automatically mean that you can afford a millionaire's lifestyle. Your net worth has to support your actual spending, not just sound impressive on paper. This is where we got into really clarifying what Mike and Janet truly needed versus, this is important, what they wanted versus what they desired. That process of separating the needs from the wants from the desires is absolutely crucial for determining if and when you can retire with the lifestyle that you're accustomed to. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that's exactly where I am, I need help figuring out what I can actually afford in retirement, then stick with me. We're going to dive much deeper into these needs, wants, and desires process in episodes coming up in just a few weeks. So hang on if that's where you feel that you are right now. Now, let's look at that second story that I mentioned to you earlier. It has a completely different outcome, but their net worth is very, very similar. This couple, I'll call them David and Linda. They came to me with almost identical numbers, $745,000 in retirement savings, a paid off home worth about $4.25, well, actually it was about $425,000. And they had about $55,000 in just general savings. Their net worth was actually a little bit less than Mike and Janet's at $1.225 million. That's $1,225,000. But David and Linda had a completely different retirement picture. They lived a modest lifestyle. They only spent about $55,000 a year. They enjoyed simple pleasures like gardening, reading, visiting local museums, and having family dinners at home. They had no debt, no ongoing financial obligations to their family either. For David and Linda, their financial position was more than adequate. They could maintain their lifestyle comfortably and even have money left over for unexpected expenses or maybe that occasional special trip that they were thinking of. What do you think these stories teach us? They show us that your net worth is just a starting point. The real question isn't how much do I have, but rather what can this money do for me in retirement? Your assets, liabilities, and net worth must be understood in the context of your retirement goals, your lifestyle expectations, and your ongoing obligations. The same pile of money can represent security for one family and inadequacy for another. This is why simply calculating your net worth, it's just not enough. You need to understand what your financial position means for your specific retirement vision. Let's dive into understanding your assets more deeply. When most people think about their assets, they think about the total dollar amount. But here's something crucial that most people miss. Not all assets serve the same purpose in retirement. I like to think of assets in three different categories. First off, you have your income producing assets. These are the investments that generate regular cash flow. That is dividend paying stocks, bonds, rental property, or retirement accounts that you can systematically withdraw from. These assets are your retirement paycheck. They're your base. Second, you have your growth assets. These are investments focused on appreciation over time, and they're important because inflation is going to demand that you are able to increase your income so that you can keep up with your lifestyle. This is going to include things like growth stocks, real estate, or even collectibles that increase in value. These assets help you to maintain purchasing power over the long term of retirement. And then third, you have your security assets. These include your emergency fund, your home equity, and other assets that provide financial stability and peace of mind. These assets are your safety net. Here's where people often get confused. They add up all of their assets and think, well, I have $800,000, so I can spend $40,000 a year using the 5% rule. You know, the 5%, you probably heard of the 4%. We're going to say 5%. But that's not necessarily true. Let me give you an example. I had a client that owned a classic car collection that was worth $200,000. Oh man, they were beautiful cars. There was this one red Roadster that was just awesome. On paper, this added up significantly to their net worth. But when it came to generating retirement income, that collection wasn't going to send them a monthly check. It was a great hedge against inflation if you ever had to sell it, and a source of a lot of enjoyment, but it wasn't producing income for daily expenses. Understanding which of your assets can produce income, which are focused on growth, and which can provide security is essential for realistic retirement planning. Now, let's talk about liabilities because that's important. This is where I see people make some of the biggest mistakes. Most people think about liabilities simply as money I owe. But in retirement planning, you need to think about liabilities much more strategically. These are really in three different categories. There's three types of liabilities that can affect your retirement planning. First, you have your current debt. That's your mortgages, your car loans, your credit cards, and your student loans. There's a lot of people that go into retirement that are still paying off student loans for themselves or maybe even for children. Every dollar that you owe reduces your net worth, and every monthly payment reduces your availability of retirement income. But here's what many people don't consider. The timing of when debt will be paid off matters enormously. A mortgage that will be paid off in just 3 years is very different from one that will be paid off in 15 years when you are retired. I had a client, a nurse, we'll call her Patty. She wanted to retire at 62. She had saved a lot. She had saved diligently about $650,000. And for a nurse, that's a lot of money. But she also had 12 years left on her mortgage with payments of about $2,100 a month. When we calculated her income, we had to account for that mortgage for the next 12 years. It reduced her available spending money by $25,000 a year. That's a significant chunk of her retirement budget. Now, the second type of liability is ongoing financial obligations. This might include alimony, commitments for caring for your own parents, or other regular financial responsibilities, maybe like taking care of an adult child, that just don't show up on your balance sheet, but it's absolutely essential to your life, and it's going to affect your retirement planning for a long, long time, if not for the rest of your life. Now, the third type of liability, and this one surprises people, is future liabilities. These are the expenses that you know they're coming, but you might not be accounting for them. The biggest one, well, it's healthcare. Healthcare costs that aren't covered by insurance. It includes also things like home maintenance and repairs, or the need to eventually move to assisted living. Healthcare and living expenses are the two biggest expenses that you usually encounter during retirement. And most of the time, these costs increase much more than people realize. So you have to take account for them. I always tell clients, retirement planning isn't just about having enough money for your current lifestyle. It's about having enough money for your current lifestyle, plus the flexibility to handle life's little surprises that we all know are going to happen. So now that we understand assets and liabilities individually, let's talk about your net worth and what it actually means for retirement planning. You see, your net worth is your foundation, but it's not your retirement income capacity. There's a difference in there. Here's a framework I use with all of my clients. I call it the retirement reality check. We take a look at your net worth and we break it down into 4 categories. I like categories, as you can tell if you've listened to me before. This is an idea that's worth writing down. So if you want to take a moment, get a piece of paper, write this down. I think you'll like it. First is going to be your emergency assets. This is typically 6 to 12 months worth of expenses that you keep liquid and you keep safe. This is not the Bitcoin that you have saved up for a future date because you know that's going to fluctuate. This money isn't for retirement income. It's for unexpected situations. Second, well, your home equity, unless you're planning to downsize or use a reverse mortgage, that is. Your home equity provides security, but it's not income. You can't sell a room in your house if you run short of income. Well, I guess you could if you wanted to, rent it out, but normally you can't do that. It's valuable, but it's not paying you a monthly income. It's not helping you with your bills. And then third is your retirement income assets. This is the money that can realistically be converted to regular income through systematic withdrawals, dividends, or other income strategies. And then fourth, growth and hedge assets. This is that Bitcoin that I mentioned to you a moment ago. I know that might not be for everyone, but some people like that. But you also have other growth hedges that you have in there, your real estate, growth stocks, other different types of investments that are hedges. This will include investments that are focused on long-term appreciation and protection against inflation. Let me give you a real example. I worked with a couple, both of them are teachers, and they had a net worth of about $950,000. They were really excited because they had almost reached that $1 million mark. If you've ever had that happen, it's a big momentous occasion. But when we broke down their assets, here's what we found. Their home was worth about $350,000. Security assets, that's an important one. But it wasn't producing income. They had $45,000 in emergency savings. That's necessary, but not for retirement income. Their actual retirement income assets only added up to $555,000. Using a conservative withdrawal rate of about 4%, their retirement income assets could only generate about $22,200 a year. Add in their pensions of about $35,000 a year combined, and they had roughly $57,000 in retirement income. For this couple, that was perfect. They had modest expenses and they were comfortable with their income level. But if they were expecting to have a $950,000 lifestyle, $40,000 a year in income, they would have been very, very disappointed. Remember previously when I told you that when you're looking at your income, your balance sheet, your total net worth, just having something that looks good on paper is different than what you need to actually produce income for you for the future. Now, this brings up something that's crucial that most financial planning conversations miss. That is the lifestyle factor. Your net worth has to be understood in the context of your retirement life, the one that you actually want to live. I've seen people with $500,000 live very comfortably in retirement. And I've seen people with $2 million struggle to make ends meet. The difference isn't the money, it's aligning between their financial resources and their lifestyle expectations. Here's what I've learned. Successful retirement planning is not about accumulating the most money possible. It's about accumulating enough money to support the life that you want to live. That means that you have three options. When your numbers don't align with your goals, that is. One option, save more and work longer to increase your assets. Option number two, reduce your liabilities and pay off that debt. Eliminate those ongoing obligations. And then option number three, well, adjust your lifestyle expectations to match your financial reality. Most people need some combination of all three of those, and that's perfectly normal. The key is making these decisions with full knowledge of your financial position rather than crossing your fingers and hoping that everything works out. I've seen that happen way too many times. Now, I want to address something that most people completely overlook when they evaluate their net worth, and that is taxes. It'd be nice if we didn't have to think about it, but it's reality. Not all assets are taxed the same way. And this can dramatically affect your retirement income. Let's say that you have $300,000 in a traditional 401k and $300,000 in a Roth IRA. On paper, you have $600,000 in retirement assets, but in reality, you have $300,000 in pre-tax money and $300,000 in after-tax money. When you withdraw from the traditional 401k in retirement, you'll pay an income tax on every dollar that you take out. If you're in a 22% tax bracket, your $300,000 is really worth about $234,000 in spending power. But that Roth IRAs are withdrawal tax-free. So that $300,000 is really worth $300,000. This is why I always encourage my clients to think in terms of after-tax net worth when they do the retirement planning. It gives them much more of a realistic picture of what they're actually going to have to work with in retirement. The same principle applies to other assets too. If you have taxable investment accounts, you'll pay capital gains taxes when you sell them. If you have rental property, you'll pay taxes on the rental income and potentially on the sale of that real estate if you ever sell it. Understanding the tax implications of your assets helps you to plan more effectively for retirement income and avoid unpleasant surprises when you actually start drawing that money out. Here's what I want you to do this week to truly understand what your financial position means for your retirement. This is your homework. First, take your completed financial inventory from last week and categorize your assets. Which ones can produce income? Which ones are focused on growth? Which ones will provide security? Now, this will help you to understand what role each asset plays in your retirement plan. Second, calculate your true retirement income capacity. Take your income producing assets and apply a conservative withdrawal rate. Let's say 3.5% to 4%. That's a good starting point. This gives you a realistic picture of what your investments can provide for annual income. And then third, factor in other income sources. Add in your Social Security, your pensions, your part-time work, or any other regular income that you expect to have in retirement. This is your total expected retirement income. And then fourth, compare this income to your expected expenses. Now, be honest about what you want in your retirement to look like. If there's a gap, you need to address it now while you still have time. And then fifth, Consider the tax implications. Look at your asset mix and think about how taxes will affect your retirement income. If most of your money is in tax-deferred accounts, well, your actual spending power is less than the account balances might suggest. By completing these steps, you accomplish several very critical things. First off, you move from hoping your money will be enough to knowing whether it will actually be enough. Next, you identify the specific areas that you need to take action on, whether that's saving more, paying down debt, or adjusting your expectations. And then third, you create a foundation for making informed decisions about your retirement timing, your Social Security claiming strategies, and your tax planning. And most importantly, you replace the anxiety about the unknown with confidence based on facts. Now, next week, we're going to continue building a financial foundation by talking about optimizing your financial position for retirement. We're going to discuss specific strategies for increasing your assets, reducing your liabilities, and maximizing your net worth's retirement income potential. We're going to also dive into timing considerations that can make a huge difference in your retirement security, when to pay off debt, how to maximize Social Security benefits, and strategies for tax-efficient retirement withdrawals. So that's all for today's episode of the Retirement Learning Lab. If you found this valuable, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and leave us a review. It helps others who might need this information. Remember, understanding your assets, your liabilities, and your net worth isn't about the numbers themselves. It's about understanding what those numbers mean for your retirement life and the one that you want to live. Don't wait. Take your financial inventory from last week and work through the analysis I've outlined today. Next week, we'll continue building your path to a retirement security by optimizing your financial position. Until then, get a clear picture on what those numbers really mean, and remember, the path from insecure to in control requires understanding not just what you have, but what you can actually do with your assets in retirement. I'm Van Richards, and thank you for listening to the Retirement Learning Lab.